You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. If the word vegan makes you think cardboard burger, you're not alone. But what if everything you thought about plant-based cooking was about to change? Stay tuned for today's inspiring episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore the vibrant world of plant-based cuisine and discover how mindful cooking can nourish both body and mind. Our guest shares insights from his extensive career as a chef and educator, guiding us to see cooking not just as a necessity, but as a meaningful practice that supports optimal health. For over 25 years, Mark Reinfeld has been a leading figure in the plant-based culinary world for his innovative approach and dedication to improving health. In addition to his achievements as a chef and cookbook author, Mark is a dedicated educator. He founded Vegan Fusion, where he offers comprehensive training programs and workshops virtually. His teaching emphasizes the integration of mindfulness into the cooking process, helping both professional chefs and home cooks enhance their plant-based culinary skills for optimal health. Mark's contributions to the culinary world have been widely recognized, including features in magazines such as Vegetarian Times and appearances on various television programs. He is the recipient of numerous awards, including being inducted into the Vegetarian Hall of Fame. Here is my interview with Mark Reinfeld. Hi, Mark. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because vegan fusion is not something we have talked about before on the podcast. I'm very excited to dive in and give our listeners a bit of insight into, I feel like it's talked about a lot, but we might not know a lot about it. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Petra. I look forward to chatting with you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. For starters, would you like to share a little bit about yourself, maybe the parts of your story or your journey that connect up with what you do today, and also share with our listeners what it is that you do today?
Cool, thank you. I've been a plant-based chef for over 25 years. I've written several cookbooks. I've done a number of consulting projects in large-scale food production, and a little bit about my background as I grew up in New York, eating pretty much anything. And then after college, I took a year off before going to law school, and I traveled. I worked as an au pair in Paris, and I hitchhiked from Amsterdam to Berlin just in time for the wall opening up, and then made my way over to Israel on a kibbutz. And that's where I started to connect with animals in a natural setting. So that's when I started to become vegetarian. And then I went to India and Nepal, and I went up in the Everest trek in the Himalayas and underwent this transformation. I would say that when I came back, law school didn't really hold the same appeal to me. So I moved out west and I started working in a commercial kitchen as a new vegetarian. And so this was in the mid 90s, and I worked there for a few years and formed my own personal chef and consulting company in Malibu, California, did a bunch of corporate client accounts, and then went to Kauai, Hawaii for a 2-week vacation, and I wound up staying for 8 years. So it's one of the longest recorded 2 week vacations in history, and that's when we opened a restaurant. I started publishing cookbooks, and then I started doing culinary trainings internationally. Now I do it virtually, and so I've really been dedicated. To me, it's a form of activism to show people how to make plant-based foods taste good for their health, the environment, and for a more peaceful world. I feel like we could talk about the benefits of plant-based for hours, but if the food doesn't taste good, then that's not going to go very far. So I really love showing people how they could tap into the inner chef and create this amazing flavored plant-based foods in their own kitchen. And they could feel the benefits for their own health and mental well-being and all the other benefits that come along with it.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your story and what a journey you've had. I love all the different experiences, even culinary, that have come into your life and that you have experimented with and lived with. Was there a particular moment you said going to Israel kind of changed how you looked at eating animal-based foods? So did that change out of a personal conviction, or did you notice something changed in your health, or what made you consider that at that time?
That's a great question. So there were a couple of things. One of the things we had to work in the chicken coops, and I was eating chicken probably 2 times a day at that point, and the conditions were very unpleasant. And I just felt like something inside of me was like, I can't do that. This isn't right. Or I don't feel comfortable doing it. And then I felt if I didn't feel comfortable doing it, then I shouldn't eat it for my own personal conviction. So that's when I started become vegetarian. And I would go, it was in the Jezreel Valley, and I would go for these long walks, and I would come upon like groups of cows, and they would gather and get close to me. And I saw little baby cows for the first time that reminded me of my dog. So things like that got me on the vegetarian path. And then it was only later when I started to feel better physically when I would take the dairy and eggs out. And so from vegetarian to vegan, it was mainly like a health oriented switch. And then I learned about the conditions on factory farms. And so that solidified my commitment to live more of a plant-based lifestyle.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that and understand where you're coming from. And I feel like a lot of listeners probably have the same experiences and same thoughts around it being sort of an ethical decision for them as well. Now, what is the difference between being a vegetarian and a vegan? Is it strictly just eggs and dairy, or are there a lot more nuances? I feel like we throw those words around a lot, but maybe we don't quite know exactly what they mean.
Yes, that's a really good question too. So, vegetarian is no meat from animals, so pork, chicken, beef. Plant-based or vegan, when it applies to the diet, eliminates the animal byproduct. So, if it comes from an animal, strictly speaking, it wouldn't be considered vegan, but that's the main difference.
I find it very interesting when I'm in the organic store here, and I live in France, as many of our listeners know, and there are the vegan imitations of the meat products. And I find this a little bit strange. There's this vegan bacon and the vegan burger patties and all those, the vegan cheese. Is there a kind of a mental thing that we go through if we remove meat from our diets and it's maybe not something we grew up with or we do this later in life? Is there like a psychological component that has the need to have something that looks like meat in the diet?
That's a really good point. So, people they approach this from a lot of different angles. I like to say there's three main reasons why people would choose to eat more plant-based. One is health or medical reasons, one is environmental or sustainability, and the third is concerns for animal welfare. It depends on why you're doing it. Part of it is like for me personally, I grew up eating meat, going to fast food, McDonald's, Burger King. I loved fast food, and I still like the flavors of it, but not what it actually is. So the health benefits. For me, I like to refer to those foods as transitional foods. So some people don't even want to go near any of those. But for me, as a chef, part of what I like to do, like I mentioned, I want people to be able to make plant-based food taste good, and a lot of that it's tied into like their family traditions and history and flavors that are accustomed to, and there's the whole emotional psychological component of eating. If you're craving meatballs and spaghetti and you can make something that tastes like meatballs and spaghetti without the meat, then for me, I'm a fan of it, knowing that a lot of processed foods isn't a long-term solution, but it could help people get over those cravings that they have.
That makes a lot of sense when you explain it that way, because I was always kind of wondering how that comes about that there are all these meat looking products that are not meat.
Yeah, it's come a very long way, the food science side of it. And a lot of them are whole food based, like tofu and tempeh. One of the things I specialize in is just creating flavors that people grew up with, but without the animal products.
I love that. I think there's a little bit of comfort in that too when we
Yeah.
can transition into that. And from a health perspective, now I hear both sides that there are studies that if you go on a carnivore diet, there's less inflammation and this and that. And if you go on a vegan diet, you have so much better blood work and you get so much healthier. So, what's your take on where do we stand with the plant-based diets?
Thank you for asking that. So, my feeling is that I know we can thrive on a plant-based diet. And there's movies that I like to recommend, like The Game Changers, Forks Over Knives. There's a website, veganbodybuilding.com. We're seeing more and more high performance athletes, people winning gold medals in Olympics, tennis pros catching the gold, mixed martial artists, bodybuilding teams, the strongest man in the world who was a vegan, the guy who ran the Appalachian Trail in the shortest length of time as a vegan. So clearly, it's possible to thrive on a plant based diet. To me, it's the idea of a well planned plant based diet. So there's like the American Academy of Dietitians and the Canadian dietitians, they all say that a plant-based diet is appropriate for all of the life stages from infancy, child rearing. But the key word is well planned. So some people will say they try it and then like, oh, that didn't work for me. But then if you probe a little, they actually became like a pastatarian. Like they didn't do because like Oreos are vegan. There's a lot of junk foods that are vegan. So I think the idea of like a whole foods plant-based diet with lots of color and variety, we're getting all the nutrients we need. And I do encourage people to get their blood work done to kind of tweak and fine tune. For me personally, I feel like we need to also look at the impact that our food choices have on our immediate surroundings, our environment. Native Americans have this idea of like seventh generational thinking. So, where you're looking at like, what is the impact? And like from a sustainability factor, I think things start to point more and more towards like plant-based. That's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I love that. Do you find in your experience that we are missing out on anything when we go on a plant-based diet as far as iron, vitamins, things that we often get from eating meat? Or can we sustainably replace that with things in a plant-based diet?
Yeah, great question. So, it goes back to like that well-planned idea. So like protein, there's a lot of plant-based sources of protein, iron, like the rates of anemia among vegans and non-vegans is the same. There's nutrients like B12 that are important to get from food that B12 deficiency can affect vegans and non-vegans. So it's important to have this well-rounded variety of food, like dry fruits are a good source of iron, blackstrap molasses. There's ways to, again, if you have variety and you're not in the same rut, you're getting all the nutrients that you need to thrive. My wife's actually a plant-based naturopathic doctor. We have something together called The Doctor and the Chef, and some of the courses we offer go over the basics of plant-based nutrition and the intro to like the plant-based culinary arts. So I give you a resounding yes on that, that it's possible.
Fantastic. That is really good to hear because I often hear that as one of the concerns is that we just won't have a balanced diet if we go plant-based. So that is really good to
Yeah.
hear. Now, let's circle back a little bit to the taste because
Okay.
I was in Germany recently for a family wedding, and the part of Germany that we live in, it's meat everything. So there's roasts on Sundays, there is meat on every holiday. It's a huge staple, and the meat is very ethically sourced. You usually know exactly which neighbor farm the cow came from or the chicken came from. So there, it's a very close knit community as far as food
Hmm.
production goes. So there's no
Yeah.
none of the commercial situations. So you know where the meat comes from.
Yeah.
But when I suggested to have a meat free meal, the eyes nearly popped out of their heads. And
Really. Yeah.
there's hardly any vegetarian options on any restaurant menus. So
Yeah.
This was a huge thing, apparently, that we
Uh,
don't ask for. And so one of the things that was mentioned is like, oh, you can't just eat plants. That doesn't taste good. So
yeah.
tell us a little bit. You said you experiment with taste so that people can enjoy plant-based diets more. So how do you make that taste good? And what kind of things do you work with in that respect?
Very good. So basically, like everything in life, practice is important. So in my classes, I always encourage people to have the Thomas Edison approach where there's no failure in the kitchen, there's no mistakes, you're just learning and learning things for the next time. There's a lot of ways to address that. So one is I have this thing called the 7 culinary keys to creating amazing plant-based cuisine. And I have an ebook and a free preview for that. And basically, there are these principles that if you put energy into, you'll become more proficient, creative, and confident in the plant-based kitchen. I'll do a brief overview of them. One is so palate development is really important. So that's where you're doing different exercises to help you develop your palate and your sense of the different flavors. Spice blends are another big thing that I recommend for people. So if you could make your own or purchase a Indian, Italian, Moroccan, Cajun, Eau de Provence spice blend, you have those on hand so you don't have to like figure out what spices to include for like a specific blend. That really opens up to turn a simple soup just with those spices. You can create a world of flavor. The other key is world sauces. Most chefs will say it's all about the sauce. Like even in non-plant-based cooking, like the sauce is what defines the dish. So being comfortable making a pesto or a curry sauce or peanut, barbecue, sweet and sour, harissa, you build slowly that repertoire. And then veganizing is another key. So that's where you look at a lot of dishes that we grew up with, even if they're meat-based, there's many plant-based ingredients within the dish. So like a chicken cacciatore, the cacciatore sauce, there's a lot of plant-based ingredients. So you could add your tomatoes and your onions and your Italian herbs and seasonings, and then you identify the animal-based product that you're looking to replace. So oftentimes I'll use tofu or tempeh, or you can use legumes like chickpeas. I like using different beans. Then I have a superfood nutrition key where you're looking to optimize the nutrition of the meal. And then the last is probably the most important is just experimentation, which I touched on earlier. So I really encourage people to have a kind, gentle, loving attitude towards themselves as they're learning in the kitchen. A lot of people are intimidated. They might have had some bad experiences, but I know based on decades of teaching hundreds and hundreds of people that everyone can awaken the chef within and can begin to make food taste good. And when they like it, then slowly they'll get more confidence and they'll feed a family member, a friend, people in the community. So it's a lifelong journey, but there are certain things that you could do at the beginning to set you off like for success.
That sounds actually really delicious when you put it like that. Now, Mark, in your experience, how does a plant-based diet address being full? I hear a lot of people telling me they had a salad and they're starving and now they need a bag of chips or something else to fill them up. So, in comparison to just having a piece of meat, which is generally very filling, how can we make sure that we don't go snacking after we have a plant-based meal and we actually feel satisfied and full when we're done eating?
Totally. Like that's another thing I specialize in is no one wants to sit down for a meal and be hungry 10 minutes later. There are things that you look at. So my go-to meal is something I call a monk bowl. And a monk bowl is a green, and a protein. If you miss any of even a hummus wrap can be considered a monk bowl. So your grain is the tortilla, the green are the veggies, and the protein is the hummus. So if you take one of those out, you just something intuitively says this is not going to be a satisfying meal. So just giving some thought to it if you're just going to go, and also why I recommend being gentle and making slow transitions. If you're eating bacon cheeseburger with chili fries one day and then you have like a salad with just lettuce the next day, you're not going to feel satisfied. So for salads that you mentioned, there's ingredients that you could add. So you can add your beans and legumes to your salad. You could add some nuts and seeds, some grains, avocado, tofu and tempeh cubes you could add. You could then take some, I call this like an ultimate salad. So if you have leftover grilled veggies or roasted veggies, you can add that to your salad. So you want to keep those things in mind, whether you want to do a plant-based, like you said, can we try a meat-free meal? You'd want to make sure you're hitting all these variables of getting the plant-based protein, some healthy fats, veggies, and that's going to make for a satisfying meal.
That actually sounds very doable for the majority of people, I would assume. So, does this kind of go into what you were saying before, the well planned part of it? So, that maybe people who are very busy, they just plan out like a meal plan for the week or something, especially if they have kids and they're working and there's a lot going on and you're trying to transition to a diet that you're not fully familiar with yet. Is there something to be said to kind of plan that out in advance and make sure you have that ready?
I think that's a good point. So that, especially like on your least busy day, I have two kids, so I know like the busy lifestyle. I think a little advanced preparation on your least busy day, if you need to jot down, if you want to jot down meals for the week or for a few days, looking at these key ingredients. I always keep this idea of like a monk bowl in mind, the grain, which could be a starchy veggie too, greens, which are lots of different veggies, different colors, cooked different ways, steam, roasted, sauteed, grilled, air fried, and then a rotation of the plant-based proteins. So the grains could be different kinds of pasta, rice pasta, quinoa, the whole range of different rices, polenta. There's lots of ways to get variety. And I think variety is really the key. People think that if you go vegan, you're minimizing and limiting your diet, but actually what happens is you wind up getting more creative and more international in what you wind up serving. So advanced prep is definitely helpful, and just giving it some thought that, do I have for my lunches? Am I going to have the ingredients I need, the dinners, the snacks, breakfast?
Is there a way of telling them? I'm just kind of thinking some people make sandwiches because they're quick and things like that. So they're
Mhm.
obviously, I find that for a lot of the products that are now vegetarian or vegan replacement products. So bread that you can use, or like I said, the vegan cheese slices that you could put on if you're
Yeah.
making a
Yep.
sandwich. So
Totally.
feels like there's more and more variety now to make this transition actually a lot easier for people instead of having to make all those things yourself.
Yeah, so much easier. So yeah, for my kids, I'll rotate through like hummus, they fortunately they like, and we'll do wraps or sandwiches for lunch, and avocado and vegan cream cheese, or they have like tofurkey has these good slice. I used to love those sandwiches as a kid. So they have like sliced turkey with the cheese and lettuce, tomato, onion. Like there's ways to really create those satisfying meals that are plant-based. They just happen to be plant-based.
Yeah, I love that. I accidentally ate a vegan cake a little while ago. I didn't know it was vegan. And actually, it was so good that I had no idea it was vegan. It was a lemon raspberry cake, and
Oh,
I had
nice.
no idea. So I do feel there's a lot of room for creativity and putting together different flavors to really make that work if you wanted to.
Yeah, especially in desserts.
Yes, absolutely. And we have a lot of options now with plant-based beverages and milks and things like that, right? So we can go that direction too. You mentioned before that you also traveled India, Nepal, and I feel like there's a lot of inspiration there for plant-based diet as well because they do eat a lot of vegetarian and vegan food. So maybe down that direction, if you like the variety of spices, would be really tasty as well.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a lot of lentils and pulses and grains and veggies. You could just get a simple curry spice blend using plant-based milks. Like India's vegetarian, so there's a lot of dairy, but it's easier now than ever, especially in the milk and cream way, to make like dairy-free dishes. And like you said, that's one of my favorite experiences, is making a dish, people like it, and then they find out afterwards that it was plant-based. So a friend of mine, I made this vegan meatball and spaghetti, and his wife came home, and he's a little lax with the truth. And she said, "Oh, where's that from?" And he said, "Oh, this, I got it from the deli down the street." And she ate, and she would never have gone to a vegan restaurant. And then he told her afterwards. So I love those experiences.
Those are the best moments because just without judgment, I feel like you're so much more open to trying different kinds of tastes and flavors. So that takes away having that preconceived notion that it has to taste awful just because it's vegan or
Yeah,
vegetarian. Yeah,
totally.
that's wonderful. And I'm wondering a little bit about digestion because when people come off a meat diet or a diet that contain a lot of processed foods, very often the digestion is not working very well, or you might have gut issues or weight
Mhm.
issues. And switching to a plant-based diet, especially when there are a lot of beans or lentils and things like that involved, can be very hard to digest for people. So, what would you suggest for making that switch to kind of get the digestion used to those kind of foods?
That's great. And it's a good point. And so it's interesting because it's plant-based diets are high in fiber, which is if you're on a heavy meat-based diet, you're oftentimes not getting enough fiber. So it's a lengthy topic to talk about the microbiome and what's involved in like healthy digestion. But basically, you're making these changes to your microbiome when you start introducing new food. There is a period of needing to get up the reserves of the appropriate enzymes and the right mix in the microbiome to help effectively digest it. There are little tips and tricks like you could cook beans with kombu or fennel seeds. You can always use digestive enzymes. We'll use sometimes. So there's ways to adjust that. I encourage people not to get discouraged if they're having digestive issues and just see that it's temporary. And then some people need to like make immediate changes, like especially cardiac issues or diabetes, or there's certain conditions where you get like a 911 from the doctor and people do make changes overnight. A lot of times I really recommend this like slow and steady approach at your own pace and just like little bits at a time that feels like you're not depriving yourself. We touched earlier about like our relationship to food and just the psychology and the emotional side of it. And I think we want people to have a healthy relationship to their diet and their food and any changes that they're making and not to be hard on themselves or too rigid. I think all that goes into like creating a good, healthy emotional state surrounding food.
Yeah, it can be quite jarring when you're not feeling well, digestively speaking, and you're trying to make changes for your health. And that is a part that you just need to work with and give it time to let your body adjust
Yeah.
to that. I would imagine it's like that for anything that you just throw into your diet. Your body needs to work with what you're doing. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, in the very beginning, you also mentioned that part of why you went to a plant-based diet is food activism. I just wanted to ask about food activism. What does that mean today when we're in this society where there are a lot of processed foods, where kids are growing up with a lot of sugar, color, preservatives, you name it, it's probably in there. What does food activism mean just beyond maybe living conditions for animals that we are consuming? Where does food activism take us today?
Awesome question. So for me, it's looking at like the food we consume and the impact that our food choices have. They touch every aspect of our life, really. So like you mentioned, like childhood obesity, you could eat a lot of junk food as a vegan and we'd still have an obesity epidemic. So it's more looking at like, to me personally, like this idea of returning almost back to nature of like a whole food, minimally processed diet that's taking in from what's available naturally around us. By doing that, why I use the word activism, so you could go join like the Peace Corps or Food Not Bombs or other of these amazing organizations that are working to like affect positive change in the world. And for me, looking at that as how it applies to food is that by encouraging people to eat more plant-based foods, and especially for me, I love showing people how to create the food themselves. Like you might have heard that phrase. It's an ancient Chinese proverb. If you give a person a block of tofu, you could feed them for a day. But if you show them how to roast the tofu and season it, you could feed them for a lifetime, something along those lines. it helps this like a multi-generational change that if you can show the parents how to prepare healthy food for their kids, the kids are going to grow up and hopefully pass it on. So the simple change of like having a plant-based meal, it seems like it's a tiny act, but if you look at the ripple effect of it on human health, kind of the message that we're sending to like the industrial food complex and processed foods, also as far as the environmental impact, the like land use, water use, the amount of pollution, every factor that you can look at, how a plant-based diet is, in my opinion, more efficient than an animal-based one. And then you look at on an energetic level, what is involved in like specifically factory farming and the industrial production, which to me is different than what you mentioned about in Germany, the local village, and everyone knows where things are coming from. To me, that's different than this massive industrial. I think China built this like 100-story building that's just like a pig farm, and the impact is immense, I think. So that's why I refer to it as activism. It's a seemingly small steps that we could take in our own life and our own circle of influence that can potentially have a massive impact on, for me, the future of humanity and our well-being, emotional and psychological well-being.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like it's taking us back to our roots in a way where things did come locally and we did grow them in smaller quantities because there was just some families that would come together and butcher a cow or grow some fields together. So I feel like that kind of mentality takes us really much more closer to our roots and in a much more sustainable way of living on this planet as well. And for our bodies and our health, where it looks like we've gotten way off track a little bit with all these things that
Totally.
we're consuming nowadays. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Now, if our listeners are curious and maybe they already are on plant-based diets and they're looking for a bit more inspiration, or maybe this is brand new to them and they want to try this, how can they reach you, Mark? And what kind of programs and services do you have available? How can people bring a plant-based diet into their lives?
Thank you. So through our website, veganfusion.com, we offer a free newsletter where I share recipes and tips on living a healthy plant-based life. I also have several digital courses that can help people at whatever stage they're at. Some that I've done with my wife, Dr. Bude. We have a Living Beyond Cancer course for those in remission and survivorship. We have a diabetes reversal program if you're struggling with diabetes. My signature program, which I love to do, is it's a 4-week culinary training. It's 4 hours a day via Zoom. You're in the comfort of your own kitchen. The last program I did, I had someone from France and England and Canada and Mexico in there. So it's very international. And we really take a deep dive into the underlying foundation of plant-based cuisine. We have each day focuses on bread baking or desserts or grain dishes, bean dishes, plant-based dairy, plant proteins, pickling, fermenting. It's a real comprehensive program. And there's information for that course on my website as well. So veganfusion.com. I have a course coming up in October, a 4-week course beginning in October. So I'd love to welcome your listeners to that course.
Absolutely. And we will make sure that we link to all of your offerings in the show notes as well. So our listeners can find out how they can sign up for that course. And I have a sneaking suspicion that you'll probably see me in one of your future courses as well.
I
I'm
would love
very
that.
curious now. So,
Cool. Yeah. The veg curious are my favorite people to have in my classes.
yeah, it just seems like there's a whole world that I have not yet explored to its full potential. So that's always, and like you said, you can take this at your own pace and start with switching out some things, see how you like it, and give yourself the time to just be curious about it. So I think this makes it really, really great to try out for yourself, for your family, and you know what? If you do try out a plant-based diet, let me know how that goes for you. I always want to hear from our listeners. Let me know what you experience, how you feel, what your favorite recipes are. And if you end up working with Mark or taking one of his programs or courses, let me know. I am very curious to hear about the kind of magic that happens when our listeners connect with our guests. So
Nice.
feel free to reach out.
we're all on a journey, as your podcast says.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all this culinary wisdom with us today, Mark. I truly appreciate you being here today and giving us a bit of a deeper dive into just saying, just eat vegetarian. We actually got a chance to explore a lot of different things, from flavors to making it work to planning ahead to some of the reasons behind it. So thank you for that. I truly, truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Petra. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Absolutely. And take really great care of yourself, Mark.
You too. Merci bien.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.